Hello and welcome to When I Stop Fighting, the podcast, hosted by Daryl Dittmer, where we talk about the fight or fights that so many of us engage in this lifetime, as well as ways to potentially relieve ourselves of those fights. Let's get started. Welcome to When I Stop Fighting, the podcast. My name is Daryl Dittmer. Today I'm joined by Anna Fruehling, a keto coach, Primal Health coach, high performance coach, and a carnivore who is thriving after 5 autoimmune diagnoses. She is the founder of SugarX Global and author of An Altered Spirit, the 12 Steps and Ebenezer Scrooge. I love that. Anna is also near and dear to my heart, a sober human. Welcome, Anna. So great to have you on.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here. I'm glad I actually reached out to you, which I've never done before, but I saw you were starting something new and I thought, you know what? If he says no, he says no. But I think I just liked your spirit and I thought, well, I'd like to be involved with this gentleman and his mission to help people take responsibility for their lives and stop being afraid to do that.
Thank you. I appreciate it. I'm so happy that you did reach out, and that was it was a cool thing for me to experience, being fairly new to the whole podcast thing. It was cool to have you reach out, and I'm so happy to have you on because I think in many ways our stories are certainly aligned, as I think so many are, and whether we necessarily know it or connect with it or not, we have a lot of the same maladies based on where we come from and how life sort of goes for us these days. So, and I believe it takes a real conscious effort to step aside from that life and to achieve something different. So I know we're going to get into all this stuff, and I'm excited to talk about it because I can relate to so much of it. But if you wouldn't mind, Anna, maybe just start with your story in terms of sobriety and change and what it was like before and some of the experiences. We'd appreciate that. Thank you.
Sure. So I've been clean since March 19th, 1989. So I just celebrated 35 years in March. But my idea of what being clean means has changed greatly in 35 years. And so I have a much more holistic approach to my clean living and to my way of life now than I ever did. And so I believe that addiction is obsession and compulsion. That's what we suffer from. And that's not the same thing as passion. I'm passionate about a lot of things that are good for me and that are worthy of my time and my attention. But there's a lot of things, I call them pretty shiny things, right? I have a disease of more, different, better. And that's what I kind of talk about in my book. And, Scrooge's master passion was gain. He was trying to have so much and there wasn't enough for him. Like I've always said, like Prince Charming could show up at my front door on a white horse and he wouldn't be good enough for me, because addiction is about like this deep inner satisfaction, and you're looking at external things to fix internal things. And I do believe it does start with something external, and it changes your brain. And for me, I believe sugar's the gateway drug. I didn't believe that in the beginning. And I actually thought things that were very, I think, immature and malinformed, and things like that. Oh, it was the trauma. It was this, it was that. But I don't think that that's true, because I've met so many addicts who said that they had wonderful parents. They always knew they were loved, and it wasn't enough for them. And so I guess, to just sum it up about what I feel about addiction is we have too much comfort, not enough cave. And back in the cave days, we would have had to earn everything, like our meals. It would have been, the other day we stacked wood. I'm visiting my mom and my stepdad's home, and I'm in their basement in North Idaho right now. And we stacked 2 cords of wood. And it was my parents, who were both in their 80s, my stepdad and my mom, my husband and I, and then my youngest daughter, who's 20, and her boyfriend that was 21. And so we stacked these cords of wood, and there was something very communal and very like, we knew this wood is going to heat their home all winter long. And we did this work together as a community, as a tribe, and there was something very deeply satisfying about it. And that's how we would have gathered food, cooked food, eaten together. We would have had all of these things that we would have been, wow, yay, congratulations us, we did it. We've survived the winter. We would have been able to delay gratification because our survival depended on it. But now I can push a button and I don't even have to leave my house. I don't have to leave home for work. I don't have to leave home for a doctor's appointment if I don't want to. I can get lab drawn here at my home, right? Unless I have some emergency or I need a colonoscopy or something, I really don't have to leave my home for medical services. I don't have to leave my home for food. I don't have to leave my home for, people are having online sex, right? You don't have to have another person or community to do anything. And it's instant gratification, instant gratification, instant gratification. And it's just a mess, So I remember climbing up onto the kitchen counter and stealing baby aspirin when I was a kid. And I needed it. I had that feeling of I've got to have it. I need something. That gnawing feeling of gain that Scrooge had, that there wasn't enough money and he had to get more. And I remember my mom always told me that they were poison and that you could die if you took too many of them. And I think she kind of knew, like, she better tell me that for some reason. And since then, I've met women who have had their stomachs pumped at 3 years old from eating the whole little bottle of Johnson's baby aspirin.
Wow.
So by the time I was 9 years old, I was born and raised in San Francisco. And so drugs and alcohol and sex and drugs and rock and roll, it was everywhere, right? It was like the way of being, and it just seemed very normalized. And so I was living in an apartment complex outside of San Francisco, and the older kids thought it was kind of funny to get the younger kids stoned. And so I got stoned, and I really liked it. I was like, wow, this is awesome. I liked the numbness of it. I liked that the world kind of disappeared and got smaller and cozier, I guess, and not so frightening in a way. I don't know how to describe that, but there was definitely a comfort about it. And I had my little tribe, and we were doing something together, and something kind of thrilling, and something kind of, it seemed worthwhile to me to pursue that. So I tried to put myself in the position to get stoned whenever I could. But I didn't really, the switch flipped. I think I was already an addict. Like, there were symptoms there, and there were definite, I don't think tolerance was an issue yet. That kind of thing wasn't an issue. But when I was 13 years old, my mom came to my room in the middle of the night and told me she had to leave because one of my really good friends, Kelly Butcher, had died in a car accident. And it was one of my mom's very best friends. It was her daughter. And so the next day I went to school, and my mom wasn't even thinking. Like, she didn't tell me that 4 other girls died in that car wreck. And back then they didn't have, this is like 1979 or 1980, No, it's 1979. It was 1979. And that next day, my whole world it felt like, who cares? Who cares about life? You're going to die anyway. I wasn't happy. My childhood was very unhappy. And, I had things like psoriasis of the nails. I was made fun of at school, picked last on the team. I was a big nerd. I could read books before everybody else could read. And I was reading like Gone with the Wind in the 3rd grade, that kind of thing. So I was just, ripe for being singled out and teased. I wore glasses in the 4th grade. For some reason, somebody thought it was a good idea to chop off my waist-length curly hair, in the 4th grade. And so now I had short hair and glasses, and, and just like all of this stuff. And so, I don't know, I just started using it. It was like a big F you. And one of my friends, Julio, always says, F you is always F me. Whenever you say that to anybody or anything, the person you're hurting the most is yourself. And I believe that today. But I didn't care. And so I began using in such a way that was, I look back and it's impossible to me that I survived what I did. because my drug of choice was yours. And I would use anything anyone gave me. I would use anything I could buy with my money from my, from my job at the movie theater or at McDonald's, right? I would use anything. And I did. And I used 24/7. And one day I used something that was laced with PCP, and I remember walking out of high school, out of San Mateo High School, and I got to the train tracks, and because it's a dissociative drug, I literally laid my head down on the tracks and watched a train coming towards my head. And I remember thinking very calmly and very clearly, you're going to die. That train is going to smash your head. And all of a sudden, this man who was entirely dressed in black hat, black trench coat, black shirt. I mean, he looked like Johnny Cash, Man in Black, but with long hair, long black beard, He lifted me off of the flipping tracks and he got me home safely. And thinking back, I don't think I was mature enough to realize he could have done anything to me, and he didn't. He was a grown-ass man, and I was in a dissociative state, and I was 14-year-old hottie, and he didn't. And so I have a huge belief in God today. I didn't see it then, but I see it looking back now, that good orderly direction was everywhere in my life, and that God had a plan and a purpose for me. And it wasn't for me to be shy or be apologetic about carrying a message of hope to addicts. I keep a pair of Elton John glasses on my desk at home that light up, that I got at one of his concerts pre-COVID, because he was talking about, I think at the time, maybe he was celebrating like 26 years or something. And he talked about it. And he's talked about, forget about your pride. Your pride will kill you. And I think that addicts have a lot of false pride because there's a lot of stigma around addiction that doesn't belong there. It's a medical issue. It's a physiological problem with your brain. And now your brain has, your brain, and people forget that it's an organ. It takes up to 22% of all the energy and ATP you make. And think about all the energy you make. The ATP you generate in a day weighs almost as much as you do. That's a lot of flipping real concrete energy, right? So it's taking up like 20 to 30% of your weight in ATP a day just to function. And an addicted brain is low energy, and you can see that on MRI. It can't think well. It can't make good decisions. It's hijacked. The reward center is hijacked, and every other function is hijacked through metabolic pathways. It's very fascinating to me as a holistic medicine for addiction specialist that you can see changes now. They're doing studies that show that heroin looks like a diabetic brain, right? Where the sugar isn't crossing the blood-brain barrier, the glucose isn't getting to the brain, so the brain is low energy, just like someone has got an insulin-resistant brain from diabetes or obesity. So you can see that sugar and other psychoactive substances act the same way in the brain. And this is why, keto is super effective and super important, because when you switch to becoming a fat burner, ketones actually bathe your brain in ketones, and it increases your, literally your mitochondria doubles in the hippocampus, which is incredible. That means you can make twice the energy from mitochondria, but mitochondria that are making ketones make even more energy. So now you're using ketones as a fuel source, and you have twice the mitochondria. And this is the decision-making center of your brain, right? Your hippocampus. And so all of a sudden you're going to see things differently. Your perspective's going to be different. Your short-term memory is going to be better, making your long-term memory more clear, right? And so you have, like, I know in AA, they talk about the clarity of mind, whatever, I think that we know a lot more now about the physiology of addiction, not just the spiritual malady, right? So I think that that's incredibly important for my personal holistic recovery and the people that I help.
Yeah. No, I think it's great. I'm fascinated by it because I've had my own I've been sober for a long time, but I also, part of, or I should say, most of what recovery is to me is getting better and moving forward and finding out different ways to. For me, it's very holistic. It's my body, my mind, my heart, and my soul, and these are all things that I have to attend to, to move my life forward and to move myself forward. And the 12 steps was a great sort of starting point for me to be introduced to a different way of living. First of all, just a very different set of instructions for life than what we're accustomed to, or what we're brought up with. At least it certainly was for me. And so that's not a difficult, piece in terms of getting my head around it and over the course of time. And then I had to dive into other things to sort of reshape what I believed about God, higher power, universal intelligence, whatever you want to call it. It doesn't matter. I'm a big believer that the less you define it, the better off we all are, because then I don't have to project it on somebody else. I can have it for me, and it's mine, and I don't have to. Nobody has to believe the way I believe, which I think is a really cool thing.
Nobody can believe the way you believe, even if
right.
if you were going to the same church, synagogue, mosque, whatever, right? Nobody can believe the way you believe, because no two people are alike. There's no way two people don't have the same perception of God, no matter what they profess.
Sure. No, understand. Yeah, I understand completely. But there are religions that, I look at religion as an idea of God, not
right.
It's another person's or group's belief about God. And yeah, however I believe is how I believe, and I keep it very much to myself. And that is, and if somebody wants to know, great. If they want to, pick a little something off that vine, great. And if they want to try to implement something in their life that they think I'm doing, wonderful. And that's why I wrote my book, because I want to help people be different. But getting back to, it takes guts to get sober, and then it takes guts to continue to improve, and then it takes guts to as that razor blade gets narrower, and we get all these messages that are saying, okay, well, and I'm a big fan of resonance. This is what we need to do, and I get the messages constantly. I get the messages, and I most often I have no choice but to follow the messages, just because I know that's my path. That's where I need to go. And that's been a very cool evolution over time. So kicking that back onto how I treat my body and how I treat what I put in myself. Wouldn't say that I'm keto. I've had an autoimmune diagnosis since 2012, which I have, for almost 12 years now, other than a short term when I went off the rails, call it a relapse, whatever. But other than that, it's been asymptomatic because of what I've done with my diet. And I'd love to hear your thoughts on that sort of stuff, because I think the autoimmune stuff is what we're all faced with.
Right, and I think autoimmunity, is, to me, it's almost like addiction. Addiction is one disease with many outlets, and I think a lot of people actually think autoimmunity is the same way. It's one disease with many outlets. So whether your outlet is lupus or, whatever, rheumatoid arthritis or whatever it is, those are just outlets of the same major problem that your body's attacking itself. And it's attacking what it thinks are foreign invaders, but it's part of you. And so, I'm not going to sit here and claim to know what autoimmunity is or how it begins, but there's a lot of links to leaky gut. And we know things like grains chronically cause leaky gut, especially the gluten or zonulin protein, and it causes a leaky gut in everyone, not just some people. But I happen to have celiac, so it's probably worse for me, and that makes it so that you don't absorb nutrition from what you're eating as well. And so, there's this thing where they say that cellular mimicry happens, and then your body sees these mimicking cells, these masquerading as your synovial fluid or whatever, or your myelin sheaths or whatever it is, and that's what it's going to start attacking. And so I think that's interesting. I also think diet isn't a cure-all for everyone. So I have 5 autoimmune diseases, and I was fortunate enough to get off of medications for 3 years, and then I got COVID. And I didn't have a bad case of COVID, but what I got was long COVID after it. And so I don't want to sit here and say diet fixes everything, but this much I know. I'd be in a wheelchair by now if I didn't change my lifestyle completely. And I'm not talking about just food. I'm talking about stress management. I'm talking about a lot of things, because stress is a huge trigger for autoimmune. So all kinds of things I've had to change. But I mean, right now I'm currently on a low dose of prednisone as well as some heavy duty medications because of the flare that I went through after being off medications for quite some time. And no matter what I eat right now, that's not going away. And so one thing that I've learned about recovery is I don't have to shit in my own nest just because everything's not going Anna's way. Right? Anna would love to just wave a magic wand and be healthy. But here's what I've learned to do. I'm grateful for my autoimmunity, because I wouldn't have investigated my health so dramatically. And I considered myself a healthy person. I was exercising every single week, but now I look back, I was over exercising. I was obsessive and compulsive about my exercising. I was obsessive and compulsive about calorie counting until I couldn't take it. And, you can't just eat less and move more. And your body is smart, right? It knew I needed to eat, but instead of eating foods that were healthy for me or eating more foods that were healthy for me, which I didn't really know what was healthy for me, because the American guidelines tell you to eat 6 to 11 servings of grain. And that was not healthy for this person at all, right? I mean, celiac is like, no, this is not healthy. And I'm trying to follow the guidelines and I'm trying to follow the rules. And I end up on the couch at night eating Ben and Jerry's and Sour Patch gummies, and I'm talking about the huge bag of them, not a small bag. And I'm not talking about one serving of Ben and Jerry's. I'm talking about the whole little pint of it, which is a lot of sugar, and I'm numbing out the way I numbed out on drugs on the couch, right? My world's getting smaller and cozier, but it's no fun. And there's no end, there's no nothing. And so I'm using food the same exact way I used my drugs, right? Obsessively and compulsively. I'm trying to control it by staying away from it, until I can't stand it anymore and I have to use, and I'm not understanding what's happening. And so when I got diagnosed with celiac after 3 years of trying to do all the things, and I was in horrible pain, and I was at this point where if I would have died young, I would have been okay with it, because the misery of the pain was horrible. I was in pain 24/7. I got up out of bed like the letter C. I was keeping my recovery alive, and my spirit was okay. I was like, okay, but if I die, that's okay too. And it was like, it wasn't hopelessness, it was resignation. It was like, if this is as good as it gets, I'm okay with leaving anytime. And I had a young child, at home still. And so, looking back, this is not a good thing. And so I actually found out I had celiac accidentally, got diagnosed, and within, a week of being off of gluten, I was like, whoa, what the hell? It was like the Tin Man got oil, at 50% more mobility, 50% less pain. Nothing was doing that for me. I was on like 30 milligrams of prednisone for 3 years, 40 in the beginning. My face was big like a chipmunk. I had the fat on the back. I had gained, I don't know how much weight, from just being on prednisone. And it was miserable, and so then I found Mark Sisson, and I was like, wow, this guy is talking about like eating like ancestrally, get rid of the grains, very much limit your sugar, this and that. So I was eating that way for years. And then I heard Bitten Johnson, who's in recovery, and she's got, I think, close to 40 years now. And she was talking about sugar as the gateway drug. And I was like, what? You know? And I'd never reached out to somebody, kind of like I've never reached out to like a podcaster before. And I've been on a lot of podcasts and I listen to podcasts, but I don't just like go reaching out, you know? Mm-hmm. And so I found myself emailing Bitten and being like, oh my God, I felt like you were talking straight to me. And next thing I know, she emails me back and asks for my phone number, and we have a conversation, and she puts me through this sugar tool, and she diagnoses me with sugar addiction, and my symptoms started at 3 years old when I climbed up on that. That's my earliest memory of having to have something to change the way I felt, you know. And I was a severe addict, and it showed my whole addiction. It showed my exercise addiction. It showed my restriction and binging. It showed everything, right? It showed my drug addiction. It showed everything. My man addiction, you name it. It was all on this chart right in front of my face, and there was no denial. Don't even notice I am lying. It was gone. It was blown out of the water. And I was like, if it looks like an addict, if it smells like an addict, you know, if it quacks like a duck, all that stuff, then it is a duck. And I haven't picked up sugar since.
Without a doubt. You know, to me, it's about the practices and the discipline and, you know, the moving myself forward or coming to myself is kind of how I term it. But, you know, for me, it's like you mentioned earlier, it's not just what we put in our bodies. It's, you know, it's a number of different things. And if I start my day, which I do and have for a long time, if I start my day with my breath work and then my meditation and then my gratitude, I can do anything else I want during that day. And I am just cruising along and it's all good. And I don't have to have anybody believe what I believe. I don't have to have anybody think about what I believe. I don't care if anybody comments on, you know what I mean? Like it doesn't matter because I'm here, you know, and if I keep those practices up and keep those disciplines up, which are not easy to do sometimes because, you know, oh, I'm busy or I've got this to do or I've got that to do or, you know, et cetera, et cetera. But if I do those things, I know where I am. And it goes back to the thing I was talking about a little earlier, body, mind, heart, and soul. You know, we've got to attend to all of them, not just the body or just the food or, you know, et cetera. It's got to be everything.
Well, they're all intertwined, and they're intertwined with who you interact with, how you interact with others. And that doesn't mean that, you know, I mean, I think sometimes in recovery, I maybe seem harsh when I'm not being harsh. I'm just being truthful. And I can't be less than truthful. And when I say that, I don't mean like brutally honest. I'm only brutally honest with myself. But I'm not going to volunteer for things I don't want to do. Or if someone asks me a direct question, I'm going to give them a direct answer. And I understand that feelings can be involved. My feelings can be involved too, but I've learned in recovery not to take things personally, you know, and I don't have to be mean. I'm not being mean. You know, I had a sponsee call me yesterday about a conundrum that she's in. And she told me at the beginning, well, I wasn't going to call you because I know what you're going to say. And I let her go on and we had our little conversation. And then I said, so let me ask you something. And she said, what? I said, were you right? And she said, what do you mean? I said, you said you knew what I was going to say. And she said, I was so wrong. It's not even funny. Because we like to tell ourselves things like you said, like I'm too busy or this person's going to say this. And the truth is like the hardest thing for anyone to say, let alone an addict, is I don't know. I don't have all the flippin' answers. And I think like for me, sponsorship is super important because what it means is I'm allowing someone and I'm giving them permission to be very, very vocal about my recovery or about recovery and share their experience, strength, and hope with me in a very honest and raw way, unfiltered, so that I might learn something, you know. And I don't think someone like that should have to pay a high price to be intimate with me and tell me things, you know, that they see or that they've learned for themselves based on what I'm talking about. I think addicts are like, we're in a jar and we can't read our own label. We have got to have people out there that we trust to read our label. Like, hey, could this be addictive behavior? And it's not even that I very rarely tell someone that or have someone tell me that. They might just ask you the right question at the right time because you allowed yourself to be exposed.
One thing you mentioned about I don't know, to me, that's another one of those things that just opens up this panorama of freedom to be able to say that I don't know because I don't need to know. And there's a lot of people that and it comes, as we go along, we gain faith and we gain insight and we gain that ability to listen to that still small voice and go where it leads us and all those kinds of things. So why the hell do I need to know? And then because you don't. And then I run into somebody, who wants to know for everybody else. And I'm just, you don't need to. You can't know for anybody else.
That's a learning opportunity for me,
without
to have
a doubt.
to grow. Yeah,
without a doubt. My prayers, I've said this for a long time, but my prayers now are just thank you. That's it. That's as far as I go. I don't need to go any further than that. We're getting close to, wow, we're already 42 minutes in, so I'm gonna I've enjoyed the conversation immensely, but tell us a little bit about your coaching. Tell us a little bit about where we can find you and your work and the things that you're doing out there to make the world a better place.
Well, I have a company with 2 other recovering people, and we're all co-founders of SugarX Global, where we all 3 of us believe that addiction is one disease with many outlets. So we also believe that sugar and processed food addiction, ultra-processed food addiction is the hardest addiction to quit or the hardest outlet to recover from because it's a socially acceptable drug. And as one of my clients says, it'd be easier to quit heroin. They don't serve that at family reunions. And I have had person after person get on calls with me and tell me that if they didn't live just like I felt, right? If they didn't wake up tomorrow, that would be okay because they have such hideous guilt and shame over something that was made to be super psychoactive, right? The cigarette companies took over the food companies, and that's when snacking came into being. And so we teach all of that lifestyle stuff within teaching because we don't believe in throwing spaghetti at the wall. So we have a system we call CARE, and that's connection, and that's connecting with the truth as well about the disease of addiction, connecting with other people, connecting with the idea of a community that's going to support you, because I promise you there's no decent program on recovery that tells you can be an island unto yourself and recover. It's not going to happen. Cooperation is why human beings have survived. We wouldn't even be a species here if we hadn't learned how to cooperate. And so we need to find people we can learn to live in harmony with, and then action steps. We've got to take action steps, but not based on misinformation. That's the throwing spaghetti at the wall and hoping something sticks. Oh, well, I'll just try this diet. And if I could just do this, then I'll be happy. We teach you how to learn how to be happy now. Because life is right now. It's not later. You can't kick that can down the road. Something's always going to happen. Stuff happens. People die. People get in accidents. You might get cancer. But you want to have the best life you can have optimally now. You never want to kick that can. And then recovery protection, which we feel is much more effective than relapse prevention. A good general is going to know, hey, this is what I've got out there today over the next 3 months, whatever. I'm going to plan, prepare, and protect. I'm not going to leave my recovery to chance. It's too precious to me, right? And then education. We talk about put on your recovery lenses. Do not listen to any podcast or read any book or anything else without knowing I have a disease of more. And all the pretty shiny things out there, is this a pretty shiny thing that is hijacking my brain right now? Or is this me making a choice that is going to support my goals and my life and my vision for my future, right? Because we got robbed of that decision making. And so we really need to have that be, we need that empowerment, right? We need that empowerment to be able to make those decisions for ourselves. And my recovery doesn't have to look like anybody else's recovery. That's something I think that's really important about the way we approach recovery at SugarX Global, is that the journey is so important. And the destination is the destination, but we can point our feet in the direction we want to go. We can do that much. And we can make those decisions today that are going to get us to where we think we want to be. And I don't think you'll never have this addict say it's ever too late. Dead is too late. That's the only too late that I know of.
Yeah, no, I agree. I agree 100%. I every day I wake up, and this is why I do new stuff. This is why I do podcasts. This is why I'm writing books. This is why I'm, doing things differently. I don't need to. I've had a lot of success in my life financially, this and that. There's nothing that I need to do. But I do it because I love it, and I do it because I want to help people, and I want to spread that message. So how do we find you out there in this vast world of information, Anna?
Well, anyone can reach out at hello@sugarxglobal.com, and you could just be like, hey, I heard you on this podcast, and can you just, I'd love to get on a 15-minute call or whatever. Anyone can do that. They can reach out to me on social media, but we support the individual to make decisions that help them. And we don't believe in failure. We believe that failure is an indication that you're moving forward, not an indication that you're doing something wrong. It's information. We don't believe in perfection. I always say perfection is the worst 4-letter word in the world, even though it's not a 4-letter word.
Very cool. Very cool. There's so many stories. I wish we had more time, honestly, and we can certainly do this again. I appreciate everything that you've shared, and your wisdom and your experiences, and good, bad, or indifferent. It's all in there. It all matters. I look at it like what is it, like ragu? It's all in there. It's just part of the journey. And so thank you for your time, and thank you for spending time with us today, and we'll catch up again soon.
Yes, thank you so much, and thank you for the message you're putting out there as well.
Thank you, Anna. I appreciate that. We'll keep going, right?
Yes.
All right. Take care.